Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to start a new topic in Python, which is functions. So let us first understand what is a function in Python. So functions is nothing but a block of code which only runs when it is called. You can pass data, which is actually known as the input to the function or the parameters. Then you can also return the data as the result or the output from the functions. Now these 3 points are the technical definitions of function, right? But in order to understand functions in a better way, you can understand function as a block of code which is reusable in nature. In programming, there are certain steps that we actually want to do again and again. For example, display certain messages, right? So one way of doing it is to rewrite all those steps again and again. But the better way is to use functions to display data or to calculate some repetitive calculations so that writing codes becomes easier. So whenever we want to execute that particular block of code again, we will be simply calling the functions. So there are certain advantages of using functions. That is, it reduces the duplication of your codes. That is, it reduces drastically the number of lines that are actually you are writing in your code, right? Because we are reusing that function and again and again rather than writing that block of code multiple times. Now decomposing complex problems into simpler pieces, right? Suppose you have a program in which you have to calculate multiple things, or you have to perform multiple tasks. So it will be decomposing your problems into smaller pieces, which can be considered as module. So functional programming is also termed as modular programming. It also improves the clarity of your code. The code can be reused again and again. And yes, it also help the programmer for information hiding. There will be certain variables and there will be certain data that will be belonging to the functions only. So later in the in this video series, we will be looking about what are the global variables, what are the local variables. All these things are involved in information hiding. So now that will be actually become clear as we will be moving ahead in this functions series. So for now, you need to understand that a function is just similar to a program that consists of a group of statements that are intended to perform a specific task. And the main function of or the main purpose of a function is to perform a specific task repeatedly, in your programming. Now, talking about how many types of functions do we have? So, in general, we have three types of functions, but here we will be discussing two types of functions, and the third one we are going to see in programmatically. So, for now, there are two types of function. First is the built-in function, and the second one is the user-defined function. So the built-in functions are those which are actually part of your Python language, right? In the previous videos where we studied tuples, where we studied dictionary, and we studied the basics of Python, we have seen a lot many inbuilt functions such as length function. Now this is the common example that we have used in list also, tuples also, sets, dictionary also. So now this is a built-in functions. So these are the functions that comes along with your Python softwares, and we have also seen so many built-in functions till now. So the next functions which we are going to focus upon is the user-defined functions. Now there may be a certain case when the built-in functions are not enough, right? So what you can do, you can write your own functions in Python, right? So the functions which are developed by the programmers explicitly according to his or her requirement are known as user-defined function. Now the user-defined functions are created with the help of def keyword. Now this is a short form of define. So def is a keyword in Python, and on your screen you can see the syntax of function. So you use the def keyword, then space, then the name of the function, and in the brackets you can see there is a word written over there which is parameters. Now parameter is input to the function. Now this parameter is optional. You can also have a parameter less function that we are going to see in your, the programmatic section. Then there is a word written inside the function. You can notice the indentation. Now let me just have a pen here. So now you can see this indentation. This is inside the block, right? So here you can see the term docstring in triple quotes, right? So docstring, or in Python it is also known as documentation string, provides a convenient way of associating documentation with Python modules, functions, classes, or methods. So this docstring is actually a small description which says what your function is going to do. For example, if your function is calculating the area of a circle, then the docstring will that this function will create display the area of the circle, right? So that is the docstring. Again, we are going to see this programmatically. And then there is, with this dash here, you can have your statements or your instructions written inside your function. And then there is a return value. Suppose that you want to use the output of your function outside the scope of your function, then you can ask the function to return the output. You can also return multiple outputs over here, multiple values over here. One thing to be noted is that both parameter and return value, even your docstring, is optional, right? So it is not necessary in your function that yes, you have to give the parameters. You can have parameterless functions, and it is not necessary in a function to return a value. You can also return none. If you do not return anything, the function by default returns none. So that is optional. Now let us just have a look on, three different types of functions. In the previous section, I've told that there are two types of function. Now let us move to another slide and see how many types of functions actually we have seen till now. So here on your screen, there is a small code which illustrates three different types of functions, right? So the first line says from math import sqrt, right? So math is a module which contains a lot of functions that performs mathematical operations such as square root, such as sine, cos, tan, trigonometric values, such as the value of pi, and so on, right? So sqrt is a function which is imported from math module, right? So this is also a kind of an inbuilt function. That is why I have in the first slide mentioned that there are two types of function, only the built-in function and the user-defined function. So this sqrt, because math is an inbuilt module in Python, right? You can write your own modules also, but math is an inbuilt module. So sqrt is a function from the math module. So this is a type of inbuilt function. Next on your screen, there is cube function, right? Now, cube function is a custom or a user-defined function with the help of def keyword. Remember, user-defined function will definitely have this keyword in front of it, right? So this is a user-defined function, right? And the next, which is, I think it is a little bit dislocated, which is absolute, right? So the arrow should be a little bit downwards. So the absolute function is a built-in function. In order to call it, you do not require the definition of it, and you do not require to import any module, right? So absolute function is a built-in function which is readily accessible. Now it is the part of your core programming language. So this is the inbuilt function. So basically we have two types of functions, the inbuilt functions and the user-defined function. User-defined function is clear that they have the def keyword. And talking about functions which are associated through modules and which are already readily accessible by the core language itself are the direct inbuilt functions, you can say. So that is a little bit example that makes the working of functions pretty much clear. So now let us move to the Python screen and have a hands-on on how we can create function with parameter, without parameter, and how it actually works. Right? So let us write some user-defined functions. Right, so now I am on the Python screen of my Visual Studio. And here, first of all, what I will be liking you to tell is if I print dir, that is the directory function, without any argument, it will be returning the name of the current scopes, right? That is what all things are present in the current scope. What is the current scope? It is the current working session, right? So if I run this particular code, right, simple one line code, you can see that it returns a list, right? And in the list we have a lot many values, like we have a lot of dunder functions in it, right? And all these functions are actually present in Python only. So let us say if I now print dir with a dunder function, which is, let's say, built-ins, right? And underscore. And now if I run the code, let us see what I get. You can see what I get is I have returned the name of the inbuilt functions that are present in Python. Like you have already seen the len functions with us, right? Already seen the eval function with us till now. You have already seen the range function, right? So as we have studied in the slides, that we do not require to use any module name with those functions can be executed directly. So these are the names of the inbuilt functions that we have, so built in. So in the current scope, that means in the current Python session, that is one Python session right now I'm working on, these many inbuilt functions we have. So if I use it, without parameter, it will be returning that what all things we have. We have the built-in functions, we have the cache data, we have the docs, we have the files, we have certain things, right, with us in the current scope, right? So in the current scope, you have seen that till now there are only the dunder functions which are already written in Python and which are available in the current scope only. Now, clearing the screen, coming back to our functions. Right. So first of all, what we are going to do, we will be looking at the three types of functions that we have seen. Let's write it: from, maths, import, sqrt. Right. So this we have done. And what we can do, we can print the square root of, let's say, 25. Right. So that can be done. Let me just run the code and you can see that sqrt have written 5 perfectly. Now the next thing which I will be actually going to do is to define a user defined function. So for that we have used the keyword def cube, and this time it will be a parametered function, and to define the scope or to define the block of code, we use colon inside, right? So here I will be returning x multiplied by x multiplied by x. So that is the cube function, right? And here let me just print cube of, let's say, 2, right? And if I run the code, you can see that along with the square of 5, we have got 8, which is nothing but the cube of your, the value you have passed over here. Now next, let me just print the absolute value of -1. And if I run the code now, you can see the absolute value of -1 is 1. So that is the true inbuilt function. We didn't require to import anything and we haven't given the definition of it, right? So this is an inbuilt function. So that was something which I was actually wanting to tell you about, your functions. One more thing, if I will be just removing this from here and this from here, and on my screens I have left with only one in user defined functions, right? And if I now clear it, and along with the cube of 2, if I now print again the dir without any argument, so that it can print the or return the names in the current scope. So now let me just run this now, and here you can see that 8 is printed out of the cube function, and in this particular list returned by dir there is a one new thing added, which is cube, that is my function. So now, because in this current session I have created a user defined function def, which is just returning the cube, you can see that it is added into your names in your current scope. Now, so that was something which I was just actually wanted to tell you about the dir, and the three different types of functions which we have actually studied in our slides. But now let us move on the user defined functions in detail. So, now what we actually want to do, we want to create a user defined function which does nothing, right? We just wanted to see that yes, we can create a function which actually do not perform any task, right? So remember, in order to create a function we will be using a def keyword, right? Let the name of my function be f, and we need to actually use parenthesis in order to show that it is a function, right? And inside the parenthesis we can put the parameters, or even we can have a parameter less function, right? So what is a parameter? Parameter is the input to your function. As parameters, we provide the data that we want to include in our function, right? So that we will be seeing when we will be discussing about the parameterized function. And colon, we have seen the if statement, we have seen the for statements, right? There also we have used these colons. So these colons, as you press enter, this colon signifies that yes, this is a starting of a new block. So in this block we are going to write the statements that we want to be the part of my function f, right? So here I am writing pass. Now what this function is going to do, what we can do is we can add in a function nothing but a doc string, right? So this function does nothing, and closing my doc string. Now this is the definition of this function. Now in order to call this function, we will be writing the name of the function with parenthesis, right? And if I actually run this code, you can see nothing is printed on your screen, or nothing is actually been done, because this function is written to do nothing, right? Now if I only call, or actually print the value f, what you can visualize on your screen is this, that f is a function which is actually located at the address, which is this coded number written on the screen. So this is the address, and if you just simply call this function with parentheses that we have actually seen before also, then definitely this function is going to return none, because we haven't used the return statement over here. So by default the function is returning none over here. Now let us visualize the working of this doc string. Now if I call help on function f, see if I actually put my cursor on f function, you can see the doc string printing over here. This function does nothing, right? This is the exactly doc string that I have used. And if we call help on the value f, you can see that this is actually explaining each and everything in everything in about f function over here. See, f is written with parenthesis in your output, which indicates that it's a function, right? And then the doc string, that this function does nothing, and then the return value, which is none, that the function is returning nothing, right? So with the help of doc string you can actually make the readers of your code understand that what is the actually working of your function, right? So this was an example of a function which is a parameterless function and which does not actually returns anything. Now let us make another function. So let me just change the name of the function and let me just take a function called message, right? And inside the message function, what I will be doing, I will be just writing a return statement, return, and let this function returns a message, which message is I am from message function, right? Full stop. Now this is what my function is returning. So it do not have any parameter, but it is returning a message over here. And here I will be writing a doc string. Now this function returns a message and full stop, right? So this is my doc string. Now in order to run this function, what we have to do, we have to call this function. So message is my function and I'm just calling it. And you can see that in the prompt, this function returns a message, which is just a simple, actually, the doc string of my function that I have written. And now let me just run this function. And here on your screen, you can see that you haven't got anything. Now why it is? Because the function is returning something and I haven't used any variable or the print statement to display the returned value. Now let me just make a little change in the code and I will be printing this particular message function. Now let me run the code, and here on your screen you got the message that I am from the function, right? Another way of doing it is you can call message into a variable. Now message function into a variable, and next thing that you can do is printing m. Now if you run the code, you can see that the same message, the returned value, is printed twice. First is from the fifth statement, that is print message, and then the second I am from the message is coming from the seventh statement, which is print m. So the returned value can be accessed both the ways, right? So that was an example in which a function can return a value, right? Now let me just make another function that actually takes something as a parameter, right? So we have now let me just take a function called name, or let us say first last name, right? So yes, you can use underscores in function name also. And let me just take the variable as first comma last, right? And let me just have a colon, right? Now let me just take a variable, say full name is equal to first plus space plus last, right? So let us this be the function and let it return full name, right? So that is a function which is actually taking two parameters and it is returning the full name, right? So now let me just take a variable, say name, and in this I will be calling my function name, which is my user defined function, and here I will be giving a parameter, say Anjali comma Sharma, right? And after that I will be printing my variable called name, right? So here, let me just clear the screen and run the code. And here on your screen, you can get the answer as Anjali Sharma. So here what happened? In this particular function, this is the def keyword. We have seen this previously. This is the name of my user defined function, and here it is taking two parameters, say the first and the last. Now these parameter is the input to the function. That means here will be providing certain values, and those values I will be using inside my functions, right? I can do any calculation on those values. So here I know that the first and last are strings. So here in the full name, I have just performed a string concatenation, right? And then after, I know that after this particular statement, that this statement over here, I will be getting Anjali Sharma connected, or the first and last connected. And then I have returned the full name after this concatenation. When I called this function in the fifth statement, I know that I have a returned value, and that returned value can either be displayed with the help of a print statement, or I can store the returned value into another variable. So I used another variable called enemy and then called the function with two parameters over here, that is Anjali and Shama. Now you have complete flexibility. You can make a function without parameters, you can make a function with a single parameter, you can make a function with multiple parameters, right? And then we have simply printed that variable and got the value as Anjali Sharma. So here was a simple description in which we have seen what types of functions do we have, how can we actually define the function, working or doc strings, working without parameter, working with parameter, and checking how we can actually return the value, right? So that was all with this introduction of functions. For more such upcoming videos, please stay tuned to my channel. If you like the video, do share it and also subscribe the channel. Thank you.